Well, I want to say hi to all of you in the NewThing network. It's an honor to be able to take a little bit of time and share with you some thoughts about what it takes to be a sticky church. You know, from January to Easter, we always have a slew of visitors that come to our churches. And at that particular time, we have a greater opportunity than most of the rest of the time to be able to not only see people who are far from God come to know Him or come back to Him, but we also have this opportunity to bring people on to greater maturity. But to do that, we have to really connect with them. We've got to be able to be Velcro to them over the long haul. And so today what I want to do is talk to you about what it means to be a sticky church. We're going to talk about why it's important. We're going to talk about what it actually is, and then some of the practical day-to-day things that would impact our ministry and enable us to reach these people and make that kind of difference. So first of all, why is it so important to be a sticky church? You know, a lot of people misunderstand that. I've written a book called Sticky Church, and people just with a quick look at it often think that it's about how to grow your church bigger. And nothing could actually be further from the truth. In fact, over here at North Coast, we don't even market or advertise and never have. We just try to take care of the people God brings us, provide an environment they know they can bring their friends to see and hear and understand what Christianity is about, and then bring them to maturity. The idea of being a sticky church is all about fulfilling the second half of the Great Commission, which of course Jesus didn't give us the opportunity to cut into a first half and a second half anyway. I can't legitimately say, well, I'm a first half. We reach people for Jesus, but we don't grow them to maturity. And I can't say I'm a maturity church and we don't really have a lot of births. The whole thing all fits together. And to be a person and to be a church that's actually fulfilling all of the Great Commission, we've got to find a way to be sticky. Because here's what happens. If we touch lives and we don't really connect for the long run, rather than making disciples, we actually inoculate people. And we've all seen people who have just enough of this disease of following Jesus that they're immune to spiritual truth. They're immune to the work of the Spirit. Their hearts become pretty hardened to God. And that particularly happens, I've noticed over the years, when people are moving from church to church or the greatest and latest hot thing that's going on in the Christian community somewhere. So over at North Coast, we've always made it such a high priority to make sure that these people are connected. I mean, just in a really practical way, when you think about it, if we are somewhat of a revolving door church, it will not be long until the word on the street is, I used to go there, not I go there. And there's nothing more devastating. I think of a real church in our community that once was growing like a weed. It was incredible to see what was happening and how God was at work in this place. But they had a ton of maturity migration. And over time, what tended to happen is, instead of hearing a bunch of people say, oh yeah, I go there, it seemed as if everybody you met said, I used to go there. And that was about as damning a report as any church could ever have upon itself when it comes to that community awareness and the word of mouth growth that is such an important part of reaching people for Jesus. The other part of why it's so important to be a sticky church is simply this. When you are a sticky church, you will be able to challenge people with hard things. Let's be honest, we live in a day and age where people have all kinds of opportunities. They no longer pick a church by its tribe or its denomination or even its neighborhood. Just like they pick the hardware store, the grocery store they want to go to, or the club program for the kid because their kid hit a couple home runs in Little League and might get a Division I scholarship. Just as they pick those and drive to wherever it is they want to go, they do the same thing with our churches. And when we speak hard truth in the lives of people in this day and age, in this culture, it is so easy for them to simply get frustrated, pick up, and go somewhere else. And they end up with tickling ears. And we end up unable to bring them through those hard points of discipleship. And what we've discovered, if we can be a truly sticky church, then we have this ability to walk people through the hard things onto that full maturity. So what does it take to be sticky? Well, it's really pretty simple. When people come, whether it's to an Easter program, whether it's back to church in the fall or New Year's resolutions, we have to find some way to connect to them. Not just offer them a great program, not just offer them a great ministry, but a way to actually connect them to our church and to our people. Now, to pull that off, there are two things that have to be done. And I want to get into some of the deep weeds of practical ministry here on this part of it. We have to actually know them, and we have to connect them. Know them and connect them. Let's talk first of all about what does it mean to know people. Well, I remember back when in the early days of North Coast Church, it was quite easy to know people. When I first came, I think there were 70 people on my first Sunday. I didn't actually plant North Coast. It was about a year and a half old. They were meeting in a high school cafeteria. It was obvious whenever a visitor or a new person came. And my wife and I personally were able to make connections with them to find out who they were, what their journey was. Well, frankly, we were only about 180 people when that began to fall apart. And now with nearly 9,000 come out on a weekend, that is absolutely impossible. So does that mean discipleship is over? Does that mean really knowing people is over? No. But it means we have to find systems. And as I said, way back at 180 people, which meant probably maybe 110 were coming that were adults and the rest were in the children's program. Way back then, we made some decisions of how we were going to run our ministry, because we realized at that point we were too big to know and track people without a system. And here's what was happening. We were being fooled by growth. I kind of made a nod to it earlier when I talked about a church that becomes a revolving door. Here's what was happening. If we were growing by 10 people but losing 6, we thought we grew by 4. And so we were celebrating, hey, church is up. Attendance is up. People being discipled, they're up. People being baptized, it's up. All of our numbers could be up when in reality we were losing people out of a back door at really significant numbers. I think of Jesus' parable in Luke chapter 15, where he talks about the 99 and the one that wandered off. To be honest with you, in the early days of North Coast Church, if 3 more came and even 2 wandered off, we didn't know anybody wandered off because we now had 101. And I think that's how many of our churches are. So what we have to do is we have to find a way to count and track faces, not just numbers. Let me explain. I often like at a pastor's conference or something to ask people this question. Do you count the offering? And it's really amazing. Every pastor's conference I've ever been at, all of the pastors tell me that their church counts the offering. Then I like to ask, well, do you just put it on a table, throw it out there and say, that looks like $10,000 and that's done, or do you count it to the penny? And they all tell me they actually count it to the penny. Then I like to ask, what do they do if they get a check from somebody that's hard to read? Do they just throw it away, or do they actually go over to that house and find out, what are these numbers and what's this word you wrote here? And they all tell me, nope, they don't throw the check away. Then I ask this, at the end of the year, do you send out notices to people thanking them for what they gave? They'll tell me, yeah, we actually do that. So I ask them, well, would I get a letter that says, Larry, I want to thank you for giving somewhere between $500 and $15,000 to North Coast last year? And they all laugh, well, no. So you actually send a letter and it's to the penny? They all say yes. And then I challenge them with this. You've just told me that money is more important than people. Because it's not very easy to track every penny, where it came, what it's used for, and who it came from. But somehow we find a way to do that. And my challenge to you is that you find a way, however hard it is, just as you've had to hire accountants or volunteers or to outsource, you find a way not to count the raw numbers of people, but to count the actual individuals and names and faces. Now let me tell you how we do it at North Coast, because we're so fortunate today. It used to be a lot harder, but we insist, for instance, in our small groups on real-time attendance. Now for us, that's really the hub of our ministry. I think right now we've got 91% of what our adult attendance number is on the weekend are in what we call growth groups, or home groups. And we insist on having real-time attendance in those groups. So how do we do it? Well, in a day and age of technology, it's not that hard. If you lead a group on Monday night, you're supposed to get online and put your attendance in. If you don't put your attendance in on Monday night, then on Tuesday, some volunteers or some of the staff looks at all of the attendance list and finds out that yours wasn't turned in. Then what do? Well, we've got cell phones in this day and age, so they text you or they actually call you at work. And they will say, hey, I noticed you weren't able to get your attendance in. Now, your response will naturally be, oh, I'm sorry, I'll do it when I get home. And to say okay is absolutely the wrong answer. Because what they need to say at that point is very simply this. They need to say, well, that's okay, I've got the list in front of me. Let's just take a few seconds and we'll work our way through it. And it literally can take 5 to 7 seconds to take that attendance. Well, I guarantee you, after you've made that phone call 2 or 3 times, you will never, ever again have to remind that small group leader to send in the attendance. They will send it in. You see, whatever it is we count is what's important. And whatever it is we expect, we must inspect. And if we want to make disciples, if we really want to grab hold of those the lives and the people that come our way during these seasons of growth, we can't just give them a program. We can't just give them a seat. We've got to find some way to know them. Because it's only when we know them that we can measure in a biblical way how they're doing in their discipleship and how they're growing. So knowing them is incredibly vital to being a sticky church. I would even go so far as it's impossible to close the back door if you don't know the people. And if it's too big to know it all in your head, it's impossible to know the people if you don't have a system that you put together. So let's take a few moments and talk about what it means to connect them as well. I learned long ago that the stickiest thing in a church is not great preaching. The stickiest thing in a church is not great programs. The stickiest thing in a church is not even a shared mission. It's close and significant friendships. If you stop and think about it, how many times have we heard from somebody who has been a part of just a ridiculously sick church? It's gone through, 2 affairs, 3 embezzlements, and all within the last 2 years. And finally somebody leaves and you ask them, why did you stay? They always tell us the exact same reason. Because all of my friends are there. You see, significant friendship is the stickiest glue there is. So part of our goal here at North Coast to be a sticky church and to pull people in and to hold them long enough to disciple them is to have the goal that everybody would have 1 to 3 of their best friends here at the church. Because I know if 1 to 3 of their best friends are here at the church, I can say hard things and they might not like it, but they'll be back. I can push them to do hard things. They may not like it, but they will be back. Connecting them is incredibly important. Now, you need to understand this, that when it comes to connecting people, they're not connected when they're part of a program. They're not even connected when they're part of a missional activity, because once that activity is over, as intense as those relationships are, they tend to scatter afterward. Any of you that are on a high school sports team, or you remember the tears at graduation from high school or college or what, a mission trip, whatever it would be. You come back from that mission trip, you have 2 or 3 barbecues together, and then after that you go in your own directions. The relationships are intense, but they're not lifelong. So how do you make lifelong relationships? We got to think of people as being like Legos. Some people are like the Lego with just a couple of connectors. Some introverts are 2, some introverts are 4. Then there's the extroverts with 8, 10, 12. There's people like myself. I'm like the base of a stinking building with about 48 little connectors. But it doesn't matter whether you have 2 or 48. Here's how life really works. Once all your connectors are full, you will be friendly, but you won't connect. And this is an incredibly important concept. You'll be friendly, but you won't connect. For instance, if someone moves in across the street from my wife and I, we will probably be the first ones over there greeting them, maybe bringing over some cookies, something like that. We'll see if God's at work. We maybe invite them over for a barbecue. And they are new to the area. None of their connectors are connected. So what they tend to do is they lay in bed that night thinking, this is absolutely amazing. What a friendly neighborhood. But the truth of the matter is my life is so full that the next time I have a free moment, I'm not going to invite them back over because I have all these other people I'm supposed to be connected to. I haven't been seen. And that's a small example of what happens in our churches over and over and over again. We are very friendly to people, but we don't have enough empty space in our life to truly connect them. Now, practically, what do? Certainly you have friendliness and you look for the people in your church who have that gift of hospitality and all that. But bottom line is, once their Legos are full, the only way they'll connect with new people is taking somebody old off. What you do is you look for ways to connect new people with other new people because their Lego connectors are empty. By way of illustration, any of you who went to a 4-year college remember what freshman week was like. In fact, some of you, I would bet, made lifelong friends. Why? Because everybody is brand new and everybody has been disconnected. And so they're looking for that connection. It'd be the same thing any of you who moved into a new neighborhood where all the homes were new and you put up fences or put in a lawn together. And it's amazing how disparate people in age, in politics, in ethnicity, in race, whatever, they will just connect because their Legos are empty. Now contrast that with moving into an established neighborhood where 1 or 2 people give you a nod and maybe one person comes over and welcomes you. Why? Their Legos are connected. Or contrast that with transferring into school as a sophomore, or even worse, a junior or a senior. They might even have a special event for all of the new juniors that are coming in, but all it is somebody sitting at a table waiting for the time to finish so they can go and hang out with their friends because all their Legos are connected. So during this time of year, what I encourage you to do is to do everything you can to find a way, like you do with the money, to know who the people are, where they came from, and what's happening. And then having done that, to do everything you can to connect people, not just with the preaching, not just with the program, not just with the mission, but with someone else that has the potential to be a lifelong friend. Because if you do that, the back door ends up absolutely slammed shut. You don't grow from 28 people that first Sunday to over 9,000 without ever having that marketing, ever having advertising. We don't even do dog and pony shows on Christmas and Christmas Eve. It's just who we are. I'm not saying others should be that way. But you don't do that without a tiny, tiny back door. And this has been the secret. Focusing on being a sticky church. Never forgetting that if we don't connect to them, we cannot disciple them. I hope this has been helpful. I hope there are a lot of things in this that you can think about, look at your own ministry, your own programs and what you're doing, and as a leadership team, hopefully make a difference in the lives of the people that God brings your way. God bless. It's been great being with you.